Funny thing is that I actually work in that exact Walmart right now, and I'm on my way there right now to start my shift because I have a. I'm a full believer that women are just as evil as men. Don't let a pretty face fool you. I'm a feminist type shit. I believe in equality. The good and the bad. You see a lot of the statistics about how men commit sexual assault way more than women. You know, I don't know, I kind of believe that women do it just as much as men. The only obvious exception to that is, violent rape, which obviously, doesn't happen as much women on men just because, the logistics of that just don't really work out too well. But, generally, I think that women probably do it just as much as men. It's just, you don't notice it as much because if, like, a woman, commits statutory rape and it's like a teacher with a underage student, the student's going to feel lucky a lot of the time, not always. And, of course, you see women going to jail for that from time to time. But a lot of those cases never get brought to light because just nobody reports it. And a lot of the time, a guy, even if it's not something that he likes and it's some kind of sexual assault of some type, he's just not going to report it because he just doesn't care as much, or maybe he thinks that he's going to get ridiculed for making a big deal about that. Big problems with society. Big problems with society. Obviously, viewer discretion. Obviously, given the title, you saw the title. I am going to be talking about sensitive topics in this video. I myself experienced something quite similar to this, and I had never really. I was very annoyed by it. It made me very uncomfortable, but it never really registered in my mind that what I was experiencing was definitely sexual abuse. I just never really thought of that, but for this channel, I am reflecting a lot upon my life and the experiences that I have had, looking for something that can be content. And because of that, I've been doing a lot of self-reflection and reflection upon my life. Looking back to this moment, I've realized that what I experienced was definitely not a-okay. Definitely a big no bueno moment. So this goes back to a story that I did tell earlier on the channel, and I will link that up there if you want to watch that video. But essentially what happened was I had hooked up with this girl. I had lost my virginity with her. I didn't really have much action in high school. I had, been moving around to different schools quite frequently. I went to a different school every year of high school. And so, I never really got the chance to know people that much. I was kind of a scrawny, awkward motherfucker. And so, I didn't really get any bitches in high school. But then, come my freshman year of college, I met this girl who was a friend of a friend. And, we hooked up, and I lost my V card. But after hooking up with this girl, I was like, okay, I've already had sexual intimacy with this woman. She has seen my member. I have put my member inside of her, and we had a great time. And so I realized that why not give it a shot? Why not hang out with her, go on a little datey date and, see if there's something there. And so that's exactly what I did. A few days later, not long after the new year of the year of our Lord 2024, I decided to go take this girl out. And so what I did was we went over to this little Mexican restaurant. I had said in the video that she was being very annoying, but looking back on it, it was more than annoying. It was straight up abuse. She was, forcibly making out with me in this restaurant, and I did not feel at all comfortable with that. Because, I never see people making out in the middle of a restaurant at 11 a.m. You don't really see that. I thought that was very weird, and I thought that would make people in the restaurant uncomfortable, and I was uncomfortable with doing that in front of people with a girl that I had barely known. And so, of course, I was not at all comfortable with that, but she was forcibly making out with me, and she was grabbing on my dick in the restaurant, I believe. Don't quote me on that. I don't remember if she was. I believe she was. Maybe she wasn't. But I do believe that she was grabbing on my dick unconsensually at several different points in the restaurant, and then we left the restaurant, and I was very uncomfortable telling her to stop. And every time, she'd be like, okay, I'll stop. And then she doesn't stop. And, then we were driving afterwards. She was grabbing on my dick in the car, making me very uncomfortable. I was telling her no constantly. She was still doing it. Then we went over we were going to go see a movie. We decided not to go see a movie. We decided to go get ice cream. She was doing the same thing in the ice cream place, grabbing on my dick unconsensually, trying to make out with me constantly. And it was being very annoying. And then, we go over to Walmart, and Walmart was probably the worst of it. I did not want to be making out with this girl and doing stuff like that in front of people. It made me very uncomfortable. and she did not get the memo. She did not get the memo at all. And then there was one point while we were in Walmart, in which we were at this little area near the entrance to Walmart. It was a little nook where there were like drinks and stuff, and I was looking for some beverages for us to consume. Upon which, she grabs my ass, straight up, just grabs my ass, very unconsensually, and I told her not to, and she kept grabbing on my ass, and it was making me quite annoyed, and I was incredibly uncomfortable. And part of me was wondering, like, why am I uncomfortable here? Because up until that point, I was starved of physical attention from women. I just didn't really get any bitches up to this point. And I thought, why am I feeling so uncomfortable right now? I should be giddy. I should be like feeling like I'm on top of the world because this woman very much wants me. I should be feeling great right now, but I'm not. I'm feeling incredibly uncomfortable and, incredibly ashamed and stuff. And I don't know what's going on. I didn't really register in my head that I was being, assaulted. After that, I'm completely done with her because she was being incredibly annoying and pissing me off a lot for other reasons as well. And so I just decided to go drop her off at her friend's apartment. But unfortunately, I go in there to say hi to the friend. And then it starts pouring. It starts pouring, raining, and I don't want to drive in the rain and the thunder, and all of the lightning and stuff. It was a terrible storm. My mom texted me and she was like, yeah, don't drive home. And so, I'm just in there and, we put on a movie or whatever. And at this point, I'm completely done with her. She keeps trying to cuddle with me on the couch and I keep on pushing her away. She keeps on not stopping. And at a certain point, I'm just like, okay, whatever. I just let her, cuddle with me. And, it just is what it is. But I am so uncomfortable. And then the rain stops and I finally go home. And I just feel like this terrible feeling in the pit of my stomach. Like this just unbelievable feeling of like disgust and just uncomfortableness. I don't know how to really describe it, but it felt awful. And I was confused on why I felt this way. Because I thought that I should feel good because this woman is very much into me. But no, I felt terrible. I blocked her as soon as I got back and I was done. That was enough of that shit. And, I just looked back on it and I was just like, oh, that girl's crazy. She's being annoying. But no, I was a victim. I was a victim. I'm a survivor, Your boy's a sexual abuse survivor, Give me some props here. But yeah, man, it's just terrible, dude. Terrible. Not good stuff. And I think that's just another example of the fact that in this post Me Too era, it's a very good thing that women are opening their eyes to all the terrible things that men do, and not really having that shit anymore. And that's a great thing. And some people online take it too far, and they'll say this stuff is sexual assault. It definitely is not. Like if two people are equal amounts of drunk and they have consensual sex, that's not a problem. Some people online could disagree. Some people take it too far, but us men take it not far enough in the other direction. We do not take it far enough. We do not realize when we are being very much taken advantage of. And we gotta stop that shit. Hopefully this will be a little bit of an awakening to some guys. Take a little bit of a trip down memory lane. Think about what's happened to you. Try to think about whether or not something that has happened to you was abuse. And if you do, have a memory that, makes you realize that it was, just realize that we should not be putting up with that shit anymore, all right? We need a men too, #men too. All right, we need to have that conversation as a society because it is definitely a problem. And, we just got to realize that, we ain't putting up with that shit anymore. So, yeah. Yeah, not good at all. And, I'm fine. A lot of people have been through a lot worse things than I have. I'm not worried about it. I wouldn't really say I'm traumatized by it, although I can remember that feeling of uncomfortableness very well. That feeling very much stays within me when I think about that memory. And, also, I work at that Walmart right now, and every time I pass by that little part, or, I have to go pick something for a customer from that part of Walmart, that memory comes to my head. I would hardly say that it's, trauma. I wouldn't go that far, but I'd say that that memory is there and that memory stays with me. Honestly, this could be why I like Latina so much, because like looking back on before this event had occurred, I had liked women of all different kinds, but lately I think my main type is Latinas. It's pretty much only Latinas, and the girl that did this was a Latina. And maybe that just comes back to the idea of how when men are like assaulted or whatever by another man, maybe they become gay. And not always. I'm not saying that somebody becomes gay because of sexual abuse, but I'm sure it happens sometimes. I'm sure that's the case on occasion. Maybe trauma can affect your sexual desires in a way, and maybe that's why I like Latina so much, because of that trauma or something, and that just stays in my psyche, and that has made me like Latina so much. And given my evil ex, who was a Latina, that's not a very good effect on me to be liking Latina so much. Not a good effect at all. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed my testimony. I hope you enjoyed this video. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, smash that notification bell. Leave a comment if you have anything to say about this. Y'all have a great day. I love you guys. Peace out.